What is the most up true story, you know? Story 1. Met a girl when I was 25. She was 22. We dated for 3 years and eventually got married. She was a truly wonderful person, and I couldn't have asked for a better girlfriend. While we were planning the wedding, she mentioned that her ex-boyfriend had offered to DJ for free. They dated for 3 years when she was 15 to 18, and it had been a clean breakup. He was also married, so I really didn't have a problem with it. I mean, free DJ service. So we got married and went to the reception. Everyone was having a great time. I was talking with a buddy of mine, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw the DJ ex-boyfriend staring at something. I looked over, and he was staring at my wife, who looked amazing, and my wife was staring back at him. I continued talking to my buddy but kept an eye on them. She was across the room, but they smiled at each other, and she started looking around the room, probably for me, but I was pretty well hidden. My wife walked toward the bathroom area, and the DJ asked his assistant to take over and started walking in the same direction. I started to panic inside. I excused myself and walked that way. I couldn't find either of them. There were 3 bathrooms, one for men, one for women, and a family bathroom that locked from the inside. I went into the men's room, no one there. I waited for a few minutes and the family bathroom opened up. My wife saw me and tried to get me to go dance, but I wasn't budging. The guy eventually came out, a few minutes later, and my wife swore up and down that he was just helping her with her dress. I left. She called my phone and again swore that nothing happened. We talked about it the next day, but I couldn't understand why she would need him, of all people, to help with that sort of thing. I was able to get an annulment. I never remarried. Story 2. I live in a small town. I'm on the volunteer fire department. We received a call one night about a structure fire with children inside. We arrived on scene to find a badly burned mother outside, the father uninjured, the house fully engulfed in flames, and a neighbor holding a child. The mother was screaming that her boys were still inside, 3 of them. We made entry and had the fire knocked down in 3 minutes. It was around 3 a.m. and hard to see anything, as everything was burned. We were feeling around the boys' bedroom when another firefighter felt something that made a noise. He scooped it up and ran for the ambulance, thinking he'd found a child still alive. When he got there, it turned out to be a burnt-up teddy bear with a noisemaker inside. The father had sprayed them all with lighter fluid and lit the house on fire. The mother woke up and managed to save the one daughter, but got badly burned trying to go back in. The neighbor caught him trying to put that same child back in through the window before we arrived. His excuse in court was that he did it for the insurance. It was a rental, and he hadn't paid his insurance premium in over a year. I know that night still haunts a lot of the guys on the department and the entire community. Story 3. When I was in high school, I dated a girl named Carolyn. Her previous boyfriend, Jamie, was involved in a pretty disturbing situation. He and I already knew of each other and had talked a few times. He had 2 other friends who were bad news. There was also a girl named Melanie Ritchie, who went to the Crosstown High School. She was very popular. Everyone loved her. She was maybe a sophomore. She was a genuinely good person, always doing the right thing, polite and respectful. One night, Melanie decided to sneak out of her house and go to a party. Jamie and his 2 friends were there. One of the friends decided he was going to try and hook up with Melanie. He spent most of the night following her around, trying to get her drunk. She resisted at first, but eventually gave in to the peer pressure. He had been giving her some kind of drugs too, either ecstasy or something else, but supposedly it was fake. She ended up getting very intoxicated, and he gave her something else before they all left together. She and this guy were in the back seat when she passed out. He was clearly not in the right frame of mind and was actually concerned that Melanie might be dead. They had no idea what to do with her, so they drove out to the woods. The guy decided he was going to take advantage of her anyway, and did so on the hood of the car. They still believed she was dead and were not about to go to the authorities. The second friend, not Jamie, had a brilliant idea. They would drag her into a ravine, put a homemade device in her mouth to destroy her dental records, and leave her body out there in the middle of nowhere. Story 4. When I was a Cub Scout, we were hanging around unsupervised waiting for the Cub leader to show up. It being the 1970s and standards of childcare being a bit different. There was a construction site nearby, and being dumb 8- and 9-year-old kids, we decided to go play in it. We were climbing into cement mixers, jumping into trenches, etc. And then this one kid decided to climb up onto a big pile of planks and jump off. He jumped off only about 4 feet down and landed on one end of a loose plank below. The plank in question had a 6-inch nail sticking out of the end, which completely pierced the middle of this kid's foot, so it was sticking out of the top of his shoe. The force of him landing on it caused the end of the plank to lever down violently on the uneven ground, and because his foot was impaled on the nail, it snapped his Achilles tendon. The other end of the plank levered up, smashed into his face, broke his nose, and knocked out all of his teeth. We didn't see him for a while after that. Story 5. First year of marriage, my wife and I went hiking and swimming at Fossil Springs in Arizona. Some random guy was cliff jumping above us, and without any warning, he decided to jump off an area that nobody had ventured to before. The next thing I knew, I saw blue and white flashing. I saw my body being carried by 3 random heroes, and then I woke up in a hospital room with a 6-figure bill. Apparently, the man who jumped dislodged some boulders. One in particular, about 65 pounds, struck my head. I was knocked into the water but floated on my back, likely due to my body's natural survival instincts. Bystanders helped me out of the water while my wife could only watch in shock, thinking her new husband might have been paralyzed, or worse. The man responsible fled the scene. I remember saying my back hurt. I was told my head was split open and there was blood everywhere. 4 guys carried me the 2 miles out. Then a kind stranger put me in his truck and drove the 4-mile switchback road like a delivery man on a mission. I was then put in an ambulance, followed by a helicopter, and taken into surgery. The end result was a broken back, thoracic 2, 3, 4, and 5 compression fractures, which made me an inch shorter. I also had a dent in my skull and a pretty intense scar. The real pain came from losing our car and having our credit destroyed because I couldn't work for months. I had no insurance because I had just started a new job. So now we're left paying $100,000 in medical bills on top of everything that went to collections. Story 6. When I was working as a locksmith, I got called out to change the locks on a house. I started the job with a coworker, and we were making good progress. The woman who called us approached us mid-job and started chatting with my colleague. They were being friendly, and then she suddenly said, "Hey, want to see something freaky?" Of course, my buddy said, "Yeah." I wasn't quite as enthusiastic because I had a bad feeling, but I followed along anyway. She led us to a bedroom, opened the door, and there was blood everywhere. I mean everywhere. The bed was soaked, the walls were covered with smeared handprints, and it was all over the floor. It was dry, not fresh. That's when I realized all the spots I'd seen in the carpet, and keep in mind I'm colorblind, were actually blood. It was all through the house, just not as heavy in the other rooms. It was spotted on the furniture and walls as well. She then told us her brother had taken his own life in there that morning. Apparently, he missed his brain and stumbled around the house before finally calling 911. They came and got him. It turned out this was their mother's house, who had passed away a year earlier. He was supposed to be preparing it to sell, but instead he had just started living there, leaving all of her things untouched. Pills, half-finished crochet projects, everything. It looked like he had been living with her ghost for the past year. Even more disturbing, his girlfriend was the only person he allowed to visit him in the hospital. The sister suspected the girlfriend had talked him into doing it, and she believed the girlfriend had a stake in the will so she could get the house. It was all very strange and unexpected. I later ran into a guy at a bar who turned out to be one of the EMTs who picked him up. Found out the guy died a day later. Small world. Story 7. My uncle's stepdaughter's house burned down, killing her and her sister. It was an accidental fire, and the most disturbing part didn't happen until after. Ann and Joe were married with 2 kids, one of whom was only a few months old. Ann's sister, Christine, was visiting while her own husband and Joe went on a fishing trip. An electrical fire started around 5 a.m. It seems Christine never woke up, but Ann managed to get her older child to run out of the house. However, Ann and the baby ended up trapped on the 2nd floor and eventually made it out onto the roof. A jogger happened to be passing by, and Ann dropped the baby to him. Ann lost her footing as she let go of the baby and tragically passed away after falling. The heartbreaking part, the baby suffered serious injuries from the fall, along with smoke inhalation. Insurance denied the medical claims because the policyholder, Ann, was deceased, so the policy ended at the time of death. My uncle had to get doctors to confirm that the baby sustained injuries from the fall seconds before Ann passed, and the inhalation minutes before. Only then did they honor the claim. Luckily, my own stepdad works in hospital administration and helped resolve the case. Story 8. So I went to high school with this girl. We were in church youth group together, basically grew up around her. Eventually, she had a few children with men involved in illegal substances. She ended up becoming addicted herself. One day, she drove to a known drug house, brought her children inside, and held a party involving substances. Her infant began crying, as infants do, so she took the child outside, wrapped a seatbelt around his neck, and fatally harmed him. She placed him in the car seat and buckled him in as if nothing had happened. Then she returned inside to continue. It wasn't until her older son told someone about what he saw that anyone realized something was wrong. That person checked and found out the truth. She's now incarcerated for life and, from what I've heard, placed in segregation because the other women in the facility were constantly attacking her. Story 9. My friend lived with his grandmother, uncle, and father. His mother was in jail on substance charges. One day we came home from school and his father met us along the way to tell us that his uncle had taken the life of his grandmother and then his own. A tragic murder-suicide. It was a rough time. My friend's other uncle moved into the house, with bullet holes still in the walls, to help cover rent while his father figured out what to do. During this time, my friend's mother was released from prison and tried to get back into his life, even attempting to break into their home. She was stopped and backed off for a while, but my friend ended up losing the home anyway. One day we came back from school to find police there again. The uncle had been arrested for illegal activity, and my friend's father ultimately lost the house. They moved into a trailer together, and somehow my friend managed to keep his life together. He still lives with his dad and is doing pretty well now. His mother is still not in the picture. It's just unbelievable what some people can endure. Storytime. Years ago, I was on spring break at Wisconsin Dells. At the time, I lived with a girl known for partying. Everyone on the trip were acquaintances. I only really knew her and two other girls. There were about 22 of us in total, mostly guys. The first night there, I got very intoxicated and ended up in what I thought was an empty hotel room while everyone went to the water parks. As I was passed out from alcohol, I began having trouble breathing. I eventually realized there was someone in the room with me. He began saying my name, and though the room was dark, I tried to make out who it was. I tried to get away. He turned me over and I began to panic. I told him to stop. I said, "No, that hurts. Stop." But he didn't. I was still intoxicated and weak, and I just tried to crawl off the bed. He kept going despite my protests. I cried, trying to understand if this was real. When it was finally over, I got off the bed and tripped over someone. There had been another person lying on the floor the whole time. I made it to the bathroom and locked the door. I didn't know what to do. You hear about these things, but it's so different when it happens to you. I later told one of the girls what happened, but I still didn't know who it was. I tried to move on and enjoy the rest of the trip. When we returned to school, rumors flew. I walked into the cafeteria and was met with people pointing and yelling awful things at me. Teachers confronted me, including the nurse. Turns out I wasn't the only one. It happened to another girl that night as well. I know I should have called the police, but I was 16, drunk, and far from home. I just wanted to forget. Later, I told my mother. We didn't have a great relationship, but I was desperate. She told me, "That's the consequence of drinking. Nothing was ever done. People in my hometown still say terrible things about me, but I've moved away and know that I am not what they say I am. Yes, I now know who did it, and I'll never receive an apology. But I've accepted that and moved on. It still affects my relationship at times, but it's gotten better over the past year. So that's it. Maybe I'm just venting, but it was all too much to hold in." Story 11. I used to work with a carpentry crew 20 years ago. We framed new houses and did remodels. We got a job for a remodel. This guy owned a house that had 2 floors with a large walk-up attic. He wanted the attic remodeled into a usable space. The first day we arrived at the job, the owner told us that he was leaving for work and that if we needed to use the restroom, there was one in the basement. Just go down into the basement, and at the end of the hallway, you'll see the bathroom on the right. So the entire crew is working. Some of us are outside. A few are inside up in the attic. Eventually, one of the guys has to use the restroom. He goes downstairs, is gone for a few minutes, and when he comes back up, he has this look like he saw a ghost. Everyone kind of notices that something is off. He asks if anybody else has been downstairs yet. Nobody had, and now we're all curious. He just says he's not really sure what's going on, but something is definitely not normal. Nobody needed to go down there right then, so we all just went back to work. Eventually, someone else needs to use the bathroom. That guy goes down, comes back up, and now he and the first guy are talking about what they saw. Now we're all curious, so a few of us go downstairs. The first thing we see at the bottom of the stairs is a small room with chairs all around the walls, like a sitting area for a bunch of people. A little like a waiting room at a doctor's office, which it turns out isn't far from the truth. Then we head down the hallway, and there are rooms on both sides. The rooms don't have doors, just curtains over the doorways. Each room has a waist-high table about 6 feet long. Then we start noticing the spigots in the walls, and one room even has a full-face respirator mask, like the kind firefighters use. At this point, we're more than a little freaked out, so we head back upstairs. As the day goes on, every time someone goes down to use the bathroom, they notice a new detail that's even weirder. The final clue that revealed the purpose of the basement was a cork board in the waiting room. It had recipes pinned to it, homemade colon cleansing treatments. That's when it dawned on us. The guy had been running a DIY colon cleansing operation out of his basement. Story 12. I've told this before on Reddit, the Ballad of Enmar. I went to a small rural high school, and during freshman year, we had a new student from Philly named Nick Martin. Growing up in an urban area had made Nick believe he was, in his words, gangsta hood. He was a small white boy who wore huge, oversized white tees and baggy pants. He genuinely wanted a career as a rapper, and his rap name was Enmar. He would, without irony, challenge other students to rap battles to resolve his beefs. Naturally, he was mocked constantly for all of this. Sometime after freshman year, he vanished from school. Rumors said he had gotten into a violent fight with his dad and had been sent to a juvenile detention center. The latter was confirmed when, junior year, he broke out of juvie and was on the run for a while. Then he faded from our memories, until my senior year of college. By this point, he was still living in my hometown and was a 22-year-old addicted to multiple substances, dating a 17-year-old girl who was also struggling. One night, they got into a fight, and he ended her life with a screwdriver in his living room. He placed her remains in a garbage bag, put it in his truck, and disposed of it about 10 miles out of town in a marsh where locals dumped deer remains. He left her in a pile of carcasses. The next day, he bragged about it over drinks to a friend, who turned him in. The police found her, found blood in his carpet, and a muddy shovel in his truck. He's now serving a life sentence. Enmar ended up being way more hardcore than we ever imagined. Story 13. So I went on vacation to a really secluded town in Oregon to visit some family and see their restaurant. Being such a small town, my aunt knew every person that walked into her store. For a whole day, I helped her at the register. A person would walk in, she'd greet them, and after they disappeared to the back of the store, she'd turn to me and say something about them. Every one of them. It was hilarious. A man walked in. She turned to me and said, "He's a dirty old scumbag." A mother and her adult child came in later getting a beer each. They do that every day. Sometimes they collect enough cans for the price of 2 Bud Lights. Exactly. I was thoroughly entertained, chuckling at all my aunt's blunt, brief comments. Then this little girl walked in. My aunt chatted with her, encouraging her to go to school. The girl responded without hesitation. "School's for idiots. I don't care. I'm going to marry someone rich and take their money." Her comments started off funny, but something about her energy was unsettling. She bought a popsicle and left. Then my aunt turned to me and said without pause, she saw her mother take her own life. I didn't say anything. My aunt went on, "This girl's mom saw her mother take her life, and when the girl's grandmother was a child, her father tried to harm her and her siblings by leaving them on train tracks. Horrific stuff. Now this 13-year-old girl only talks about using men, how everything is pointless, and how she doesn't plan to live past 25. This story might not sound that wild, but it made me appreciate my own slightly dysfunctional but safe family. Story 14. As a child, I didn't have the best upbringing. My parents fought. A lot. We were trailer trash, literally living on the wrong side of the tracks in a rough town in Canada. We got lice, lived off the food bank, and often had one terrible babysitter after another, because both parents worked and drank. My dad was, and still is, an alcoholic. He also loved woodworking, and his makeshift wood shop was cobbled together across the hallway from my room in our trailer. I was about 5 years old, I'm a girl, and I was sick with the flu, so my mom made me stay in bed. While in bed, I had an accident. Being 5, I wanted my mom, so I started crying and calling for her. I heard my dad in his shop yelling for my mom to shut that kid up. Mom didn't come. Dad came in and saw what happened. I had soiled the bed. He got angrier and angrier as I cried. Where was she? He left and went back to tinkering in his shop. I could tell he'd been drinking by his tone, in the way he yelled. He came back and told me to shut up or I'll give you a reason to cry. I kept crying. I was sick, uncomfortable, and likely had a fever. He stormed in, took the soil sheet and rubbed it in my face. He made me ingest some of it. He left the sheet on my face and slammed the door as he left. My mom finally came in. She asked him why he hadn't cleaned it up. Story 15. This is about an old manager of mine. It happened while I was still working with him. He had been with this woman for about 10 years. He was the main father figure to her children. It was a great relationship. He was so happy. All that jazz. It turns out that before they met, she had been a dental hygienist who worked on inmates' teeth at a nearby prison. She met, fell in love with, and married one of her patients. He was in prison for having committed a violent crime against a 16-year-old girl. So he gets out of prison and goes to find his wife. She breaks up with my manager, kicks him out, and the man moves in. They lived together for about 6 months. During this time, he reportedly made threats toward the woman's 16-year-old daughter. The mother did nothing, and the daughter ended up leaving and moved in with my manager. About 2 months after that, the man took the woman's life, stole her car, and crashed it, resulting in her death. Her 8-year-old son found her in the laundry room, covered in dirty towels. He now lives with my manager as well. Story 16. My dad married someone really unstable a few years back. And right after the divorce, he told me what really happened to her cat that ran away. She absolutely hated the cat. The cat had been given to her daughter as a kitten years earlier from her ex-husband. But by the time of this story, it was a super laid-back, overweight cat who liked to hide. The cat had been declawed because she didn't want her scratching the curtains and also had asthma, so she was pretty inactive. We'd come home to her constantly complaining about the litter box smell and saying the cat needed to be outside. She started leaving the back door open, but the cat had no interest in going out. One day we came home from school and she was acting strange, saying that the cat had run away. I knew that wasn't true, but I figured maybe they gave her away. We were all pretty upset, but there wasn't anything we could do. Fast forward 2 years, I was talking to my dad, and he couldn't keep it to himself anymore. He said that she had called him, asking him to dispose of the cat's body because there had been an accident. He rushed home to bury her before we got back and said it was obvious it wasn't accidental. When he asked what happened, she said the cat made her angry and she lost it. She took engine cleaner and forced it down the cat's throat. My dad said the poor thing looked like it had been mangled. Its body was twisted, the fur was standing up, and there was no way it was an accident. This woman deliberately harmed a sweet, defenseless cat who did absolutely nothing wrong. She just existed. Story 17. I'm using a throwaway for this for reasons that will be obvious. I've also changed everyone's names. Back in high school, I had some wild friends. One of them, let's call him Bill, was heavily into drugs, mostly selling. He was in and out of juvie a lot. Another friend, James, had semi-distant family involved in some questionable business. Then there was me. Let's call me Guy. I had issues with local groups. We made a pact. If any of us needed help, no questions asked, we'd be there. After high school, we went our separate ways but stayed in touch. I went to college but dropped out after a year. Bill still sold drugs. James got married, moved away, came back, divorced, and started working as a bondsman. I had some terrible relationships, was assaulted and got angry at the world because the law didn't recognize it. I joined James as a bondsman. It was rough, gave me some PTSD. We used to joke Bill would eventually end up on our list. Months later, Bill called. He wanted out. He had given the police information and was laying low. He said he'd call if he needed us. 3 weeks passed. James was on edge. I had a terrible night and wasn't talking much. Then Bill called. James answered and switched to speakerphone. Bill sounded terrified. He said he drank peyote, lost time, and was now 4 states away. He asked us to meet him halfway at a gas station in a small town. When? I asked. Right now. Just get here. We geared up and took James's car. Stopped for Red Bull and supplies at a gas station where they wouldn't panic at the sight of 2 guys with body armor. We used cash. We didn't know what we were driving into. We barely spoke, just muttered about food or gas. Told the drive-through and gas station folks we were cops. Close enough. James handed me his spare firearm and extra clips since I carried a revolver. He was nervous. We got there. Bill was waiting in a red Mustang, not his car. He said he woke up in a seedy motel surrounded by strangers and found keys in his pocket. Then he opened the trunk. It looked like something out of a movie, a briefcase full of cash. We couldn't believe it. Peyote, a 2-week memory gap, and now this? So the gas station staff wouldn't ask questions. We cuffed Bill, put him in the car, and stashed the money. I drove like a maniac. James uncuffed him. Bill offered us money, but we assumed it was dirty. We got home. Bill claimed the cash as casino winnings, paid taxes, and used it to go to culinary school. He's now a chef. James remarried and moved around with his military wife. Me? I went back to college, got a useless degree in networking, worked call centers for 6 years, and now sell cars for James's dad. That's life. Story 18. The neighborhood next to mine is where a woman named Darlie Rudier took the lives of her 2 sons, Devin, age 6, and Damon, age 5, while her husband and 7-month-old baby Drake were asleep upstairs. She claimed an intruder broke in, harmed the boys, and fled, all while she slept through it. My dad did some volunteer work with law enforcement and got to review the case files and images. He told me that one of the boys was harmed with such force that the knife not only went through him, but lodged half an inch into the concrete beneath the carpet. Not only that, but just 8 days after the incident, Darlie and some family members held a birthday party at the children's gravesite to celebrate what would have been Devin's 7th birthday. She was seen, wearing a revealing outfit, spraying silly string over their graves, and singing happy birthday. As of 2014, she is on death row awaiting execution. Some people are truly disturbing. Story 19. I was dating a girl I worked with quite a few years ago. One day she wouldn't return my calls or texts, and I started freaking out, wondering why, feeling depressed and angry that she had just disappeared. Eventually, about a week later, I got in touch with one of her friends. Turns out the girl I was dating fell into a deep depression when her ex-boyfriend and best friend was killed during a police incident. The whole story is completely disturbing. The guy had been pulled over for not having plates on his car, a simple infraction that usually just results in a warning or fine. But he made a mistake and had a pipe in his car, which the officer spotted. While he was being detained, the police investigated further and found that a car matching the description had been involved in a gas station drive-off. It later turned out that it wasn't actually his car, but they didn't discover that until later. Meanwhile, they were stacking charges, and he started panicking because he had been drinking and using substances. As they were placing him in the car, he began spitting at officers. One of them grabbed what they thought was a spit mask, used to protect officers from people spitting during arrests, but it turned out to be a biohazard mask that needed to be properly connected to work. Used improperly, it restricted airflow, and he tragically suffocated in the back of the police car. Story 20. I'm a rock climber, and there's a local crag on the edge of the rougher part of town. Naturally, that means people are drinking up top, spray painting the rocks, smashing glass, and sometimes even living in the surrounding woods. Despite that, the rock is good, so if we only have time for a short session, we sometimes go there in the mornings or afternoons. Every time one of us climbs there, we come back with a story. These range from people throwing beer bottles or phone books at climbers, to others tampering with gear while you're not looking. The worst story I've heard happened to someone top roping a route. Their rope was anchored at the top, and they were about halfway up an 80 to 100-foot climb when the rope suddenly flew past them over their shoulder. Someone had cut their rope from the top and walked away. They were 50 feet off the ground. Fortunately, they managed to finish the climb without falling and hike back down safely. The level of disregard for human life in that act makes my blood boil every time I think about it. Story 21. An old roommate once told me about a cousin of his in Michigan. One night, his cousin went out looking for drugs in Detroit. He knew from experience to bring both pocket money and separate money for his purchase, because he fully expected to get robbed. Sure enough, when he got to a particular building, he was robbed at the door, lost the pocket money but kept what he needed. He picked up his stuff and started leaving without any other issues. But as he walked down the hallway toward a stairwell, he saw an apartment door open. As he passed by, he slowed down and glanced inside. There were 3 to 5 men inside, and at least 2 appeared to be involved in something horrific with what he described as a completely unresponsive and discolored female body. According to him, there was no sign of life, and her skin had turned purple. He didn't stop. He kept walking because he had what he came for and nothing left to offer. Not that it would have helped. Story 22. One of my friends has probably ruined one of his best friend's life. They met at work when they were about 18. He thought she was cute, and she fell deeply in love with him. Quietly, they would go to parties and hook up, though he was constantly looking for other women. At one point, he was dating another girl while still hooking up with her on the side. When that relationship ended, they started spending nearly every night together. Everyone in the friend group noticed. Normally, that would be a sign of a solid relationship forming, but in this case, it was toxic. He constantly degraded her, telling her they would never be together, that he just wanted a casual thing. If she ever talked to another guy, he'd get jealous and suddenly show interest again. When they weren't together, he'd send vague, emotional texts, just enough to keep her on the hook. After about 3 years, she got pregnant. He convinced her to end the pregnancy, saying it would ruin his life and that he didn't want to be with her. She went through with it, and things returned to normal. This cycle continued for another 6 years. He would call her over, she'd do whatever he asked, including his laundry, and then he'd tell her to leave. The whole friend group told her she was being used, but no one really called him out. He's charming, and it let him get away with a lot. Now they're about 28, and he just started dating her best friend. She's devastated and doesn't know what to do. Recently, a mutual friend told him he was interested in her and asked if it would be okay to talk to her. He said no, that he wouldn't be comfortable with anyone he knew dating her, all while dating her best friend. It might not be the most shocking story to some, but it's easily one of the most emotionally damaging dynamics I've ever witnessed. She spent her entire 20s stuck on someone who had no intention of loving her, who actively manipulated her, and made her feel like everything was her fault. I can only imagine how deep the psychological scars run from that. Story 23. I was an EMT for a while in a major U.S. city. We got a call about a man in respiratory distress at a motel. We arrived to find a skinny man in his underwear screaming, and a man over 300 pounds lying naked on a tarp on the floor, completely covered in baby oil. We had to call the fire department for help. They used rubbing alcohol and blankets just to get him on the stretcher, where he immediately slid off in the hallway, and we had to do it again. Eventually, we got him to the hospital, but he passed away that evening. What had apparently happened was that the man told his wife and kids he was going on a business trip, but instead flew out to meet someone he'd met online. I know people have unique preferences, but his was to take Ambien and then engage in a particular act that left him incapacitated. There was video evidence at the scene that confirmed it was consensual. However, this time, some of the baby oil got into his lungs, clogged the alveoli, and caused him to suffocate. I can't imagine how uncomfortable the call must have been for whoever had to reach out to his wife and explain what had happened. Story 24. In high school, I knew this girl. Let's call her M. She was a fairly normal person, had a decent group of friends, and I was pretty close to her. I even had feelings for her at one point. We used to talk all the time on AM. This was back when everyone used AM, and I met her cousin Jay through those chats. Jay was older and looked like the classic preppy guy, Hollister clothes, frosted hair, the works. But he was down to earth, and we messaged on and off for a few years. M met an ex-girlfriend and close friend of mine, A, through AM as well. They didn't really connect, but A and Jay did. They grew close, and over the years, A told Jay everything about her life. I didn't think much of it. Jay seemed a little off. A would call him and never get an answer. Just texts with excuses like roaming charges or travel delays. Still, they stayed close for nearly 8 years. Jay shared everything with her. Relationships, run-ins with the law, a time he convinced a partner to terminate a pregnancy, travel stories, and even said that if he ever settled down, it would be with her. A trusted him more than anyone. She knew his whole circle on social media and even chatted with his friends. Then something strange hit me. Years ago, before MySpace became huge, we all used a site called Zanga to blog. One day Jay commented on one of my posts, but under M's username. Then he commented again under his own, saying M had been at his house and forgot to log out. But at the time, they didn't live anywhere near each other. I hadn't thought about it for years, but suddenly it all came flooding back. I messaged an old friend H to ask for M's number, claiming I wanted to reconnect. I got it. Then I asked A for J's number. After some hesitation, she gave it to me, and M's and J's numbers were exactly the same. I was stunned. M had invented J. The entire world thought she knew. Jay's social media, his friends, their stories, was fake. All of it. I had no idea how to break it to A. I texted M saying something like, "Funny, I meant to text Jay, but it went to your number instead. How odd." She immediately knew she was caught and confessed everything. She'd created Jay based on a real guy she found online and fabricated an entire life around him using photos from his MySpace page. I took screenshots of the confession and sent them to A. She was in total disbelief. She tried reaching out to J/M, but got no response. Later, I met with her in person. She was devastated. To be misled for a few weeks or months is one thing, but to have your reality manipulated for 8 years with no purpose other than someone else's amusement is something else entirely. A still struggles to connect with people. I sometimes feel guilty for being the one who exposed it all, but I know that if I were in her place, I would have wanted to know the truth. Story 25. My father was in the military when I was born. He was stationed in Tacoma, Washington, or at least that's where I was born, so probably the military base closest to that. One day night, they were doing some exercises. My dad and his buddy, let's call him Joe because I forget his name, dug a foxhole and were in it. Somehow, orders got mixed up. They had tanks running over the foxholes. Joe kept peeking his head out to see what was going on. My dad was freaking out, yelling, "You're going to get run over by a tank, get down." The last time Joe poked his head up, he took a phosphorus bomb to the stomach. He fell back into the hole, screaming. He was trying to put his intestines back into his body. My dad tried to help him, but the phosphorus kept burning his hands. Joe didn't make it. My dad got an honorable discharge. He told me the story after I witnessed him having a PTSD episode. He would try to hide under tables, the porch, anything he could get under, screaming at Joe to stay down, that he was going to get run over. Then he'd start screaming that his hands were on fire from the phosphorus. I can't find anything about it online. I think it's one of those things the military doesn't want anyone to know about. Story 26. A friend of mine told me about how his old housemate completely lost it. He went through some really hard times and it messed with his head. He started doing awful things in the bathroom. First, he defecated in the shower. That was excused as him going through something and having an accident. Stuff happens. Then my friend and another housemate went on holiday for a week. The guy who had lost it was supposed to come too, but never booked the trip. When they got back, they invited some new friends over from the trip to hang out at the house. It was a university-organized trip, so everyone came back to the same town. They found that the housemate had smeared feces all over the bathroom walls. That killed the mood completely. Everyone bailed after that, but they still had a lease, so they had to stick around. The behavior didn't stop. At the end of the contract, when cleaning out the house, they found a number of disturbing items, makeshift objects that had been smeared and left behind. One of them was a can opener. Yes, an actual can opener with a vaguely shaped handle. The whole thing was horrifying. Story 27. I did a report for a criminal justice class on a gruesome murder in my hometown in Utah. 3 men decided to rob a home audio store. They drove a van into the back alley and took the employees and a customer into the basement, where they tied them up while robbing the place. During the robbery, 2 more people showed up, relatives of the employees coming to pick them up after their shift. They were also taken hostage and thrown into the basement. After the robbery, the attackers tried to end the hostages' lives by making them drink a corrosive chemical inspired by something they saw in a movie. When that didn't work, they shot them execution style. One young woman was assaulted multiple times before being shot. Incredibly, one of the hostages, who had been bound, forced to drink the chemical, shot in the head and had a pen kicked into his ear, survived. Out of the 5 hostages, 2 survived. The perpetrators were caught and 2 of them were given death sentences. It was one of the most disturbing cases I've ever read about. Story 28. My hometown is small, and we moved away when I was around 4, but my brother returned there to attend junior college. While he was living there, a woman who lived just down the street from the college and had 2 small children was murdered. Her husband was frequently away on business, and it turned out he was affiliated with a gang. In this group, if a gang member was traveling through town, they could stay at a brother's home. It was just how they operated. While her husband was away, a man stayed in their house for about a week. He ultimately took her life, decapitating her while the children hid in a closet and witnessed everything. Afterward, he fled immediately. The kids ran to a neighbor's house, and the police were called. My brother said the man was never caught, but for a couple of months afterward, many gang members came into town asking locals casual questions, trying to find out if anyone knew who the guy was or where he went. Every time I visit, I drive by that house. No one has lived in it since. It stands abandoned on a street lined with nice homes and manicured lawns. And then there's this dark, overgrown house. Sometimes local Boy Scouts will do a service project to clean up the shrubs and mow the lawn, just to help the neighborhood feel a little better. Story 29. It hurts to remember this part of my life, but I figured it might be good to get it off my chest. I have a little sister. She is an amazing, smart, and intelligent woman. It took me too long to realize that what she did was not only incredibly brave, but took a lot of strength. Even if she doesn't know it, I will always love her until the day I die. Anyway, it all started when she was about 13. My cousin, Mail, who was 23 at the time, started taking special interest in her. He would hang out with her frequently, bring her lunch at school, and take her for ice cream. None of the things he did seemed odd, though the frequency definitely was. I didn't think it was weird because I thought the world of him. As a 15-year-old boy, anyone who's 23 has a cool car and is good at sports is someone to look up to. He even asked me if I felt weird about how close they were. I told him no. I trusted him. This went on for a while, and nobody thought anything of it. Cousins are like siblings in our family. It had always been that way. So everything seemed normal until my mom found my sister's diary and read it. In it, she wrote about how they expressed love for each other and how, even though they knew it was wrong, they couldn't hide it. My parents thought it was just a phase. They sat them down and both insisted it was nothing, that they were just close cousins. Being Middle Eastern, my parents didn't know how to handle it, so they told them to stop seeing each other and stay out of each other's lives. That temporarily ended things, but it apparently resumed later. My sister was very religious and went to a Catholic school. She believed deeply in forgiveness. She asked my parents to forgive him, telling them she already had. Slowly they came around and cautiously forgave him. 3 years later, our family went through one of the hardest times we've ever experienced. While on a school retreat, counselors were encouraging students to share in a safe, judgment-free space. My sister confided that the same cousin and she had become close again, and this time, it had turned physical. Kissing, touching, and other inappropriate behavior. The counselor did his duty and reported it to the police. A case was opened. My parents were notified, and I'll never forget the moment my mom told me. I broke down. I felt like it was my fault, that I had failed as an older brother, that I let someone I trusted hurt my sister. He had done all this under my nose. It still hurts. My sister fell into a deep depression. She started self-harming and stopped talking to the family because she felt betrayed. He was arrested, charged, and is now a registered offender. You can look him up online. I had friends who knew him. That made it even more embarrassing, knowing someone in my family had become that person. His family didn't believe my sister. They couldn't process that their son was being sent to jail. They grew to hate us and haven't spoken to us since. There's now a rift between our families. We haven't communicated in years. Any news I hear about them comes through other people. Sadly, this event shattered our family. It's been quite a while since then. My sister's doing well now. She's going to graduate college soon. I've tried to speak with my uncle a few times. It's been awkward but civil. I can't say the same for my aunt and her other children. Story 30. This is more hilarious at someone else's expense. But one day my next-door neighbor in the dorms walked into my room and asked to borrow $25. Apparently, he needed $50 to buy a treatment pill because he had contracted gonorrhea, and he only had $25 in cash. Why couldn't he use a card? His parents monitored his credit card statements closely. But it gets better. How did he catch it? He met a girl on a dating app who was so unbelievably unattractive that, when his beer goggles wore off mid-hookup, he realized what he was doing and quickly lost his momentum. This caused the condom to slip off, which led to a brief unprotected moment. Thus, the infection. Worst part? The condom stayed inside her for a while before she managed to remove it. Story 31. I was 7 years old when my dad took me fishing. We had a summer house down in a seaside area, close to the water. I got a bit bored with fishing and decided to walk back home while he stayed behind to keep going. As I was climbing back over the rocks to get to the footpath, about 10 feet behind my dad, I reached up to brush my hair behind my ears. Right at that moment, my dad was casting his fishing hook, and bang! The hook caught my hand. As he whipped the line forward, he pulled me completely off my feet. My dad was a big, strong guy, 6'4", and the force yanked me hard. He had to push the hook all the way through the other side of my hand so he could snip off the barb and pull it out cleanly. It was disgusting to witness at 7 years old and obviously painful. But looking back now, I realized that fish hook could have easily caught my face, or worse, my eye, if it hadn't hit my hand instead. Story 32. Police found the charred remains of a girl next to the railroad tracks. There was also a diaper at the scene, which raised concerns that a baby might have been involved. Years later, another body was discovered in a cardboard box that had been thrown off an overpass, or something like that. Authorities released facial sketches, but no one came forward with information. Nearly 20 years later, they received a call from a woman claiming to know what had happened to those girls. They were her sisters, and their mother had taken their lives. The mother had abused all 3 girls from a young age, while always favoring their 2 brothers. One day she shot the oldest daughter, the first body found. She refused to take her to the hospital, not wanting anyone to discover what had happened. Instead, she left her on the bathroom floor to suffer. The caller said they were forbidden from helping her or even speaking to her. They had to step over her and pretend she wasn't there. Miraculously, she recovered. When she turned 18, she asked to leave, and her mother agreed, on the condition that she allow her to remove the bullet so she couldn't report it. Desperate to move out, she agreed. The mother used a kitchen knife to remove it. The wound became severely infected, and the girl slowly died in the bathtub. They put her in diapers, like the one found at the first scene, because she could no longer use the bathroom on her own. Eventually, she passed away. They boxed her up and burned her. The second body was another sister. The mother had locked her in a linen closet for days. No food, no water, and no space to sit due to the shelves. The caller said that at first they could hear her crying for help, but then she stopped, and eventually the closet began to smell. When they opened it, she had passed away. They placed her in a box and threw her off an overpass. Eventually, the mother was sent to prison for life. The brothers, who had supplied the boxes from their workplace and participated in the abuse, served some time, underwent therapy, and were released in the early 2000s. Story 33. My fiance's roommate's family was in the public eye a couple of years ago because her sister was, allegedly, brutally murdered by a group with dangerous and cult-like tendencies. I won't go into too much detail to protect their privacy, but it was a very high-profile case. The roommate is a nursing student, and last semester, she took a psychology class. In that class, they discussed notable events involving extreme psychological behavior. One day, the professor pulled up an article about her sister's case, and the entire class ended up discussing her murder, while she sat there in silence, completely stunned. Her family has been devastated by the tragedy, and I can't even imagine how it felt for her to listen as fellow students talked about it like it was just another topic. What amazes me is that she remains one of the funniest and most positive people I know. She's incredibly strong, even after everything she's been through. Story 34. A cousin of mine, who was around 14 when this happened, was working as a motoconcho, basically a motorcycle taxi. His older brother worked at a 5-star hotel and had a girlfriend. One day, my younger cousin saw that girlfriend with another guy. He quickly left the scene and came straight to my house. After parking his bike, he told me and a few other cousins what he had seen. He wanted to call his brother, but he didn't have a phone. He used my mom's cell to try reaching him, but his brother never answered. Then my cousin rushed out again, and that was the last time we saw him alive. He went missing that day and was found the next afternoon. His throat had been slashed, likely with a kitchen knife. According to what spread around town, The girlfriend wanted to scare him into silence. She didn't want him telling her boyfriend that she was cheating. So she got a few of her friends to pretend to be motoconcho passengers and convinced him to drive them into the countryside. Once there, they forced him to go further, to the spot where he was later found. The plan was just to scare him. They only brought a kitchen knife, but things got out of hand, and they ended up taking his life. Everyone in town knows who was involved, but to this day, no one has ever been arrested. Story 35. My brother's friend bought a car from me. A few months later, his friend was found dead at the fairgrounds, in the car I had sold him. Apparently, he had gone there to make a drug deal. The person he met, an 18-year-old, seemed sketchy, so he backed out and went back to his car. The kid then approached with a shotgun. As my brother's friend was getting into the car, the kid shot him 3 times in the chest, took the drugs, and fled. The body was there for 3 days before it was found. The shooter was caught after his girlfriend informed authorities that her boyfriend had confessed to the crime. During his time in jail and awaiting trial, the kid reportedly offered his cellmate, who was scheduled to be released, money to eliminate his girlfriend so she couldn't testify. Fortunately, the cellmate informed the authorities. It's all incredibly disturbing, especially considering both the victim and the shooter were teenagers. My brother's friend was only 19. Sad times. Story 36. I started with OxyContin. My girlfriend at the time began doing it with one of my pot dealers and started spending less and less time with me, raising questions about what she might have been doing to get it. My dumb idea was that if I started using too, she'd spend time with me instead. That worked until I ran out of money. Then she was right back over there. At first, I snorted it and quickly became addicted. She had been using it for a few months before me. We eventually broke up after she cheated multiple times, but we stayed friends and used together. The dealer had 2 types of blood cancer, which he claimed was from playing with cleaning chemicals as a kid, and he had a legitimate OxyContin prescription. He also took a drug called Neupogen, which came in glass syringes. As his tolerance went up, so did his pain, and he started injecting the meds. That led my ex to start injecting too. Eventually, I tried it. It was more effective, more cost-efficient, and just plain addictive. This went on for a while. She got with another dealer, and all 3 of us remained intravenous users. Then one week, city police executed a coordinated raid on every known Oxy dealer. Supply vanished overnight. Oxy generally sells at $1 per milligram, so an 80-milligram pill was $80. After the raids, prices skyrocketed to $200 plus per pill, if you could even find it. Most of us were taking at least 80 milligrams a day, meaning you had to come up with hundreds of dollars daily just to function. That wasn't sustainable. Not long after, people started turning to Hero. Whether imported or already in circulation, I wasn't sure. I wasn't part of that. But it cost $50 for a nifty, 1/10 of a gram, and 1/4 of that matched an 80-milligram Oxy in strength. Within 2 weeks, everyone I knew who used Oxy was on Hero. The problem with Hero is unpredictability. It could be heavily cut or incredibly pure. You never knew, which meant overdoses were common. Tolerance increased rapidly, and the high didn't last nearly as long. Everyone got caught up in shady stuff to afford their habit. People ripped each other off constantly. It was chaos. By then, my ex had 2 kids with another user. Both babies were born with substance exposure, one born premature by C-section. She needed open heart surgery to replace a damaged valve due to infection and had suffered a stroke from a blood clot. The children were rarely changed or fed properly, and the younger one developed MRSA due to poor hygiene. I let all 4 of them stay in my 400-square-foot condo in exchange for them keeping me well. We all slept in one bed. It was hell. Eventually, legal issues caught up with her. She was court-ordered to attend rehab. One Friday night, she ditched rehab and showed up at my place. It was only 2 blocks from the center. I let her stay for the weekend on the condition that she'd return Monday. That weekend, we drank, smoked pot, took Xanax, even smoked crack, but no Hero. She was trying to stay clean from that, or so we thought. Sunday night, I fell asleep around 11 p.m. I woke up at 2:30 a.m. and didn't see her. I found the bathroom door locked. When I forced it open, I saw her lying on the floor in a puddle of vomit, my phone soaked in it, and a needle and spoon nearby. Her lips were purple, eyes rolled back, skin clammy. I tried CPR. All I got were gurgling sounds. I needed to call 911, but my phone was ruined. In a panic, I grabbed the needle and spoon and threw them in a dumpster before running out to find someone with a phone. I called 911. They arrived and attempted resuscitation, but declared her gone. At the station, I was interrogated for 6 hours. They brought me home after, but the trauma wasn't over. I walked into my living room and found a 6-square-foot pool of blood on the floor. Apparently, the compression machine they used had ruptured her skin. I had to call out of work. I held a job nearly the whole time I was an addict. I never found out who gave her the drugs, but it wasn't me. A blood test confirmed I hadn't used heroin. Still, months later, I was arrested and charged with felony evidence tampering for moving the needle and spoon. I spent $14,000 on legal fees to avoid jail. I got 3 years felony probation instead of jail time. That night was the last time I used anything hard. I've been clean for 5 years, 8 months, and 17 days. Life is good now, but I went through 6 years of hell to get here, and it took losing my best friend on my bathroom floor to finally quit. Story 37. I have a classmate, let's call him Carl, who regularly goes out to party. And after every weekend when he comes back to school, he talks about the crazy parties he went to. There was this one story, though, from this spring that was really messed up. It was like any regular spring weekend. Hot outside, humid, lots of alcohol, etc. My classmates were out partying with some of their mutual friends. Nothing spectacular, it sounded like. As time went on, Carl, another classmate, Jörg, and some of their friends were the only ones left at the party, so they decided to head into town to meet up with some other friends. They got on a bus with a 2-liter bottle of Coca-Cola. Now Carl was super thirsty, and Jörg and their friends decided to give the bottle to Carl, telling him it was Coca-Cola, but it was actually 2 liters of pure vodka. Carl just went all in on the bottle because he was so drunk that he didn't notice the taste. He chugged the entire 2-liter bottle in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. That alone is insane, but it wasn't even the most disturbing part. After they got into town, Carl started feeling sick. Jörg and the others were just standing nearby talking, not really paying attention. Then they decided to get on a bus to another place, completely ignoring the fact that Carl was lying on the ground vomiting blood. Just blood, not even any of the alcohol. Luckily, some people nearby called an ambulance, and even more fortunately, they were really close to the hospital. What had happened was that Carl's stomach had literally burst and leaked alcohol and acid into his body. The doctor said the only reason he survived was because he worked out around 10 hours every day. Story 38. My father worked as a cameraman for a local news station in North Carolina when he was younger and would listen to the police scanner to catch the latest news stories. One afternoon, he heard a call go out about the Piggly Wiggly, a local supermarket, which he was very close to. Since he wasn't a cop, he didn't know what the call was for, but he headed over anyway. He beat the cops to the scene, rushed in with his camera ready, and found a man and a woman riddled with bullets on the floor of the manager's office. The culprit was sitting calmly in the desk chair, smoking a cigarette, with a homemade .50 caliber machine gun on the desk. He turned to my dad and said something like, "I won't hurt you. I've killed who I came for." The police later discovered he had been building the machine gun for years, part by part. The victims were his wife or girlfriend and her lover. All 3 of them had worked at the Piggly Wiggly together. My dad still can't go into one of those stores without feeling incredibly disturbed. Story 39. I've got a couple. When my mom was a kid, around 10 or 11, her mother got pregnant with twins. The twins were born prematurely and died right after birth. After that, my grandma, who had been a great mother up until that point, had a psychotic break and started abusing my mom in some horrible ways. She blamed my mom for the death of the twins. She became obsessively religious and convinced herself my mom was possessed. She even called a priest to perform an exorcism, during which my mom's arm was broken. She told her she wished she had never been born and treated her like a curse. As an adult, my mom ended up in several abusive relationships, probably because of the trauma she endured. One man in particular, who called himself Kassar, pronounced Kaiser, was especially dangerous. He was from Afghanistan and identified with violent extremist ideologies. He was cis, violent, and controlling. When my mom was pregnant with my half-brother, he broke into our apartment and waited silently in the dark to scare her. He also beat her, even during pregnancy, once breaking her front teeth. After my brother was born, he threatened to kidnap me and sell me as someone's wife overseas. I was 6 at the time. He said I'd be worth more because I was white.